Friday, August 14th. I got it.
Go.
All right. Welcome to the Covered 6 Tabletop Debrief. I'm Bryce Eddy.
I'm Chris Dunn.
It's August 14th, Friday, right?
Episode 10.
Episode 10. All right. Well, we are here at the Patriot Center in the Condor Tactical Studios, and we have a special guest, Dr. Keith Rose. I'm only going to say 3 things about you and then let you kind of run with your bio and whatever you want to talk about, make sure that everybody knows. But Army captain, tactical medicine, cosmetic surgeon, podcaster.
I mean, very common combination.
Sure.
You see a lot. Yeah, basically it. I'm a plastic surgeon, plastic and reconstructive. But I do a lot of cosmetic now.
Okay.
Yeah, it pays a lot of the bills. So by grace, we stay very busy. But I mean, you kind of nailed it. I do a lot of work overseas. I tell people I'm a country doctor. I'm just not sure which country I'm in.
I like that.
Keep it simple.
Obviously, there's things that we would like to talk about, but we'll just keep it to you've spent some time in third world countries, war zones.
I have.
Donating your time.
I have. I spent a lot of time initially working a lot of areas down in Central and South America.
Yep.
And I wish they were more garden spots, although it was a lot of fun being in South America. I worked in Tarapoto, Moyobamba, up in what they call the Alto Selva, the high jungle. Back in the day, you remember that was when you had a Luminoso Cedero, the Shining Path.
Yeah.
And they dealt with that terrorism problem and the narcotic problem there. And it was pretty difficult in that area because it was isolated. It's a lot easier to get to. Moyobamba is a beautiful little town up in the high jungle, like 50,000 people, but it used to take 4.5, 5 hours to get from Tarapoto to Moyobamba back in the day when I was there. Now they have a paved road. It's like 45 minutes. But there was a lot of criminality, and I think at one point Tarapoto was the car bomb capital of the world. They had like a car bomb a day going off.
Wow. Just
because of all the discord. I mean, anyone that wants to look back into the 90s.
Yeah.
And you can see that. Or late 80s.
That's the cocaine story.
That's a lot of
people
cocaine.
Don't know Peru, Colombia.
Right. Because a lot of the cocaine was grown in the mountains of Peru and then transported to Colombia where they processed it. Yeah. And unfortunately they had actually a fascinating story. They had the way they dealt with that criminality. It was a real problem. It was all over. They were killing the judges when they would have these guys arrested. The cartels or the Luminoso Cedero, which is the Shining Path, would have them killed. And so I believe his name was Montessori, the general or the number 2 guy in charge of everything, put together something, the Judges Without Faces. And so what they would do is they would take these guys that they would arrest and they would strip them of all their clothes and videotape it. Not show, bad, but to show people that they were not abused, beaten, or coerced. And they kept the judges' faces hidden. And so the judge could actually listen, the prosecutor, do everything. And they were able to prosecute these guys. And that's how they ended it. It was the Judges Without Faces.
Wow.
It was very interesting.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Fujimori, the president at the time, absconded with billions of dollars and left the country. But it was fascinating. And I know a lot of friends. I still have them down there. And my wife and I still travel down there. We go into the jungle. We operate. I've embedded with their special forces in the Vrime, which is probably the highest, and this just a few years ago, the highest area of narcotic trafficking and human trafficking in South America. It's called the Vrime. There's only 2 jobs in that area, and it's a big area. It's not a tourist zone, and it's on any map in Peru of anyone that knows anything, there's a big red circle around it. The military, that's where most of their special forces get their tactical training, their tactical medicine training, and we went and trained their tactical medics and then operated on the people they brought us, the people with craniofacial malformations. And the reason they do that is they said, look, we do things for the local villages because there's only 2 employment paths in this region. It's either with what they call the narcotraficantes or the traffickers or the dealers, or with the military. So it was awesome. I mean, we were flown into a base. We lived on base for a week, and then we went inside to where their equivalent of their rangers worked. These are some of the most squared away, motivated guys I've
Yeah.
ever seen. And they would take us into a city, and they would have hard security points all over the city, because they went of town, like a little town in the jungle, and they said they would go in 2 days early just to clear them out so we could go in and do a clinic. And when we were walking, I remember we go across, and they're all carrying scars. That's a really nice kid. And we cross this little river, and we get out, and all of a sudden they hold us up because they had Overwatch. I mean, they were very serious people. And we stopped, and then the commander came back to me and said, "We got to hold up. We just made a discovery." And literally, like 50 yards from us, they found 1,000 pounds of ampho and C4.
Nice.
And they were excited because that's
Yeah.
a big hit for them.
Yeah.
And so and I ended up operating on a bunch of kids, but they brought me this one lady who had a messed up nose from a previous surgery. And she's probably 32. And the commander goes, "Can you operate on her?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, there's a story here." He said, her father is the #1 trafficker in the entire country, and she's been in prison for 15 years.
Wow.
And he goes, "We're going to do this surgery for her because we want to show the people that once you've served your time,
Wow.
we rehabilitate you."
That's
And so it was
Wow.
it was real humbling to see these guys were not only brilliant tactical soldiers, but they really understood the information side of warfare and of conflict. They understood, they have what they called their CIA, and they understood that it wasn't enough to just defeat these guys, but they wanted to win them over, and they wanted to show them. And so, while we were operating, they had news teams from all over the country covering, and they had set up, and it was all true. It was carefully scripted true, because they wanted to show the people, look, we're here to help, because they couldn't do anything without the support of the people. No matter how good your unit is, no how good your team is, if you can't get the people behind you in the region, you're going to fail. And so then I ended up over in Afghanistan and Pakistan after that, and I saw a lot of those lessons learned in place that I had learned a long time ago. So being over in Afghanistan and Pakistan, I was in with one of the first wave of NGOs and non-government organizations. And my job when I got there was working at Cure Hospital off Darlaman Road in Afghanistan. And another doctor there, a guy by the name of Rick Manning, was the head of the hospital. And general surgeon came up to me and goes, "Keith, we got an interesting job." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "We have to find surgeons." I go, "What do you mean we have to find them?" He goes, "Well, when the Taliban were here, a lot of people were sent to medical school. So we're really not sure who is an actual doctor, and even after past that, who's an actual surgeon. Because we had all these people show up when we sent out the announcements. We must have had 150, 200 guys who were all, quote, doctors. And when I asked them who was a plastic surgeon, almost everyone raised their hand. And so it was really interesting, and it was different because you still had the Taliban there. The hospital we were in, we had just cleaned up, still had black marks on the floor when the Taliban had control of it and were building fires in the hospital to keep warm. And it was in winter, and I'll tell you, I've never been that cold since. I mean, it was just miserable. But we finally found a guy, that Dr. Hashimi, who's a brilliant young man, trained. He was a plastic surgeon, and we trained him more, and he's now on his 7th fellow in Afghanistan. And so they're really, I've done or been a part of over 2,000 cleft lip surgeries in that country, and Dr. Hashimi's probably done thousands, and the guys he's trained have done thousands. And we also started a family practice residency that's on their 7th or 8th class. And interesting enough, we also have an OB residency. Now in Afghanistan, as you know, men don't look at women or treat them. And I'll give you an idea about a day in the hospital. When I was there, I was operating, and someone came to the operating room, and they're panicked. They're like, "Dr. Rose, you've got to come right now. We have a problem." And I had learned that when we have a problem meant that someone was probably going to die. That's an Afghan's version of "we have a problem." And so I walked out, and he said, "There's a certain person here, and his wife, uterus ruptured during childbirth. She just had her 5th daughter.
Jeez.
And we have to take the uterus to keep her from bleeding to death. But we have to get permission from her husband Oh, by the way, her husband's a Taliban commander, but he's not telling anybody, but they're from Ghazni. And he's very well respected, and people are scared of him. We want you to talk to him. I'm like, sure, let's get the gringo to talk to this guy. Well, when I walked in, there was an English doctor, female doctor, who with a translator was berating him because he wouldn't let her do what she needed to do. Now, in Afghanistan, women don't berate men. Right. And berating a Taliban commander is probably not on your top 10 things I don't want to do. Yeah. So I walked in and I looked at her square in the eye and I said, you need to leave now. And then, of course, she kind of bucked up and gave me her best, I don't know how to describe this. Basically, she looked like one of those school teachers that knows everything, put her hands on her hips. And I just took my eyes, I cut them over. She stepped over and I leaned into her and I said, this man's a Taliban commander. He'll kill you and everyone you're living with if you keep talking. And she got quiet. It's the first time I ever heard this woman get quiet, and she walked out. And so I sat down with the guy and I looked at him and I basically said, I'm sorry that this happened to your wife. Your daughter was so strong, she broke your wife's uterus. And I knew he was upset because he wasn't having a son. He didn't have a son. That's important in that country. And I said, but your daughter is strong. She's so strong, she just tore right out of your wife's uterus. And to save your wife's life, we need to be able to take that uterus and operate on her. But I recognize that she's under your authority. And I would not even think about doing anything without talking to you first. So if you would like, we will save your wife's life. If you don't want us to, you have complete authority. I respect it. We will allow her to die. It's your call. And he stopped, and then he ripped off something in Pashto, the translator, and the Pashto he said, operate. So, and I thought it was going to stop there.
In that country.
What?
Huh?
Apparently they don't respect women in that country. I thought America was the bad guy.
Yeah. Well,
what's going on?
Well,
everyone wants to lead. They're saying we're so evil.
I went back to
Sounds
the
pretty bad place.
Yeah. Well, and then I went back to the OR. 2 minutes later, they came back. We have a problem.
Jeez.
And I go, what? And they go, she needs blood.
Uh-oh.
And I was the only one with the blood type to transfuse her. So he got to walk into the room. I had to ask his permission. Man, and I literally, they transfused me to her. Well, they took my blood and then they turned around and gave it to her. And I've got a picture of this. He and I actually became friends. And it wasn't, the thing is, and the reason I'm telling this story is, when Americans, when we go to other places, it's real important in the military and the protection services that were over there and a lot of the intelligence services is to understand the culture and what you're dealing with.
Yeah. And
to recognize that. It's different here in California than it is Texas. But there, if we didn't understand the culture, then she would have died. Yeah. And then if she would have died, then the hospital's responsible for it, and it could get worse. I lost a good friend years later that they came in and shot. Jerry, it was all over the news. And another friend, Dan Terry, in 2010 was killed doing some work for the Taliban. So it was
doctors?
A sketchy. Jerry worked at Curie, was shot in the courtyard. Dan was a 50-year missionary there, never talked about it, just helped the people. He was revered. He was the one that taught me how to get around. And his wife, Saya, tiny Finnish nurse, Dan went, he was up in Nuristan working at an area that we had worked a long time. And long story short, we found out that the ISI, through some people in Kabul, found out about it, and they sent some guys across from Chitral, and they shot Dan, and they killed him and several people. One of them, a doctor, a surgeon from Great Britain. And it was really tough. And I remember seeing her afterwards, and we're all devastated, and it making me promise that I wouldn't go find the guys and kill them because I was upset. Dan was like a second dad to me.
So here's the question. You have this successful practice, which is traditional American understanding of plastic surgery in Texas.
Right.
You and your wife go to these places that most people consider hot zones, war zones, no-fly zones.
Yeah.
And you're actually smiling and you do these amazing things. Why do you do it?
Everyone, I guess it's the same reason you got to do your thing. You have something God puts inside of you, a call, and everyone's different. You know, I've got lots of kids, and I'm dealing with 2 16-year-olds right now, and they're like, "Well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do."
Well, that is like a war zone, but yeah.
Big time. They're bigger
It's
than
challenging.
me. I'm 6'3", and they're both bigger than me.
Oh, geez.
But it's just something that we feel driven to, and it's something that I got to tell you, I never felt in danger there. If you're doing something that's your passion and you enjoy. My wife, of course, wasn't in Afghanistan and Pakistan with me, and she wasn't
But
in Somalia with me, but she
South
was in
America's
South
no joke.
America. No,
Yeah.
she was in some pretty rough
People don't-
places. I mean, literally the guys on our team that went in, and I was blessed. I worked with some good guys. There were several former Rangers, really squared away guys, and we enjoyed doing this because it's one thing to go help where everyone wants to go, but if you want to make a difference, we wanted to go to areas where we wanted to support the local law enforcement and the local military, and it was on our hearts to do that because these guys are trigger pullers, they're door kickers, and they're the best of the best, but there's a big IO side to that, and that you need people with a certain skill set. They couldn't get the Peruvian doctors to go in there. I mean, they thought it was too dangerous because they had plastic surgeons and Peru, some really good ones, and they'll work certain areas, but they're not going to go to the Vrime because, quote, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But it was a place where we felt like we were actually making a difference, and what we have here, I guess, and that's why we understand this. I took my kids to Ethiopia for a month while I worked, and we lived in an area where we had a decent house, but my kids played with the local kids. They literally made bow and arrows and threw rocks at each other, and they thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And that's why I laugh about this whole racism. My children grew up with a bunch of Ethiopian kids, and they had them over to the house, and we gave them cookies and fed them, and it was a great place. And working around the world, I worked with people of all different races.
Of course.
Men, women. No one ever thought about anything but, I guess the easiest way is the mission, what we were doing, whether it was operating on children, whether it was to clean water.
Taliban's wife.
Yeah.
You saved her life.
Yeah.
What
And
are
it
we
was
doing?
just, and the lady
I
that
didn't
saved,
expect that story.
yeah. I mean, it was just,
This is
you
crazy.
just do it. And then,
Yeah.
the last time I got called out of there, we had a problem. I went out, and they literally had a family that was ready to riot in the hospital corridor, the main corridor of this hospital, which is all cement, and it's cold there in Kabul. And I was watching them, and because what happened is they brought their mother in, who was basically dead. I mean, she was 90 years old, which in Afghanistan, 90 years is a long time. She had eaten up with cancer, very sick, and the family waited to the last second to bring her to the hospital. So basically, she was, agonal, and she died. But the family did that so they could relieve themselves of the responsibility, and now they have to blame the hospital. And families in Afghanistan can be quite big. I worked with a family in Iraq on the front lines in Mosul, and that family had 1,000 members in it. So I'm telling you, families can be big. They're not all, multiple cousins, relatives, etc. But this one, it was fine until one of the family members reached for the security guard's AK. And so that's when I wrote the first rule of Afghan surgery: don't touch the security guard's AK-47. That's bad. You have to do something. So, I was standing there. I didn't know what to do. I knew that if he pulled that trigger, we're going to have bullets going down a cement hallway, and the ricochets alone, there are probably 50, 60 people in this, 40-yard corridor. And I didn't think about it. I just grabbed the guy that grabbed the gun. And to get him out of the way, I lifted him up. He wasn't big, over my head, and I body slammed him on a stretcher that was just sitting there. And again, I just didn't want him to touch the gun because I was worried that everyone would be shot. And I grabbed him by I meant to put my hand on his chest, but I think it ended up on his throat. And I rushed him down the corridor in this gurney, parting people like the Red Sea, and opened the doors with his head and to the outside. And when I did that, I turned around and looked back, and everyone had gotten quiet and was just staring. Because I wasn't thinking. I was just wanting to get the problem out of the way. And that's when I learned something else. And I'd been there a while. Because when I came back in, all the doctors were like, yes, surgeons, we're tough. You know, it gave them like this because I kept the guy from shooting people. And this guy was like 5'6", 100 pounds. I mean, it's just not a great feat. But
That's only something you'd see at Kaiser.
the
Because I'm at Kaiser, and that could happen. But everywhere else, that's crazy
but
stuff.
the sheer violence of it, I would thought, oh my gosh, they're going to all be mad at me.
Yeah,
but
no, you
then
went
the
for it.
family went outside, and because we did that, then they all started talking, and everyone was crying and hugging. So, you know,
Do you do like jujitsu or anything? Are you like?
I've been,
you do
I did
firearms training?
Aikido
Like-
my whole life. I stayed in
there's something on board
Aikido, and then I studied Sistema. It's a Russian martial art that,
Yeah, so you're
for a long time.
you're a capable guy. I mean, you're not just
well,
a
but
surgeon.
I didn't, yeah. Well,
You're not worried about your hands, and you're just.
I was worried about getting shot and a lot
Yeah.
of other people. I mean, there were ladies, children. And the thing is, this main hallway was where, you know, the women in the burqa with their kids would squat and
Yeah.
sit and wait. It's the waiting area. And all I could think about was if he pulls that trigger,
Oh yeah. No, it's.
you know,
on.
those skip rounds are going to be everywhere.
And they will pull the trigger.
Yeah, because it was his emotion. I mean, I don't know if this
Yeah.
guy even knew how to shoot an AK-47.
Probably not.
The security guard probably didn't know how to shoot it the way he was handling it.
They were just being emotional.
They were being emotional.
Good
so
for you.
But the thing is, and there's lots of, you know, stories you look back. I honestly, before this podcast, hadn't even thought about that in 10 years.
Well, that's why we let it out because you're the guy that you get a scotch and sit there for like 8 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
But-
I thought I had some story. I mean, I know people with stories, and I think they're down here now.
No.
I mean,
And
you-
look,
we
this
just-
guy was
we
like
could
100
even ask
pounds
a
soaking
question.
we
wet.
could go. Yeah, we could go for hours.
That's two stories
with,
right there. I'm like this.
Well, but just tell you,
And Bryce hasn't said
different.
a word, and to get him to shut up, like,
I know. It's,
But it's just other
takes a lot.
cultures are different. And then I guess to circle back
even
to see
Nick's
what's
over there
going
going,
on
what
in this
the hell
country
is going
now.
on here?
Yeah, but to see
But you're
what's-
also a pilot, right?
I am. I'm
So
a pilot.
you flew your jet here.
I'm
Is it your jet or-
typing in the jet. It's mine, but I'm typing in it. So
'Cause I
I'm-
got to throw that out there. 'cause
I have a
you're also-
pilot.
You got all this stuff. It's like this James Bond surgeon / jujitsu
could-
fighting.
okay, I'm not. I'm
War
not,
zone,
I'm not typed in my
Taliban.
plane yet. I'm learning. I've got
Okay.
60 hours in it. I have 3,000 hours in small planes, like propeller
Okay.
planes. You know, single engine. But
Not everybody owns a jet has to learn how to fly it, by the way.
it's a single
But
pilot
you-
jet. I'd like.
I'm
to
not
learn.
surprised.
My
Yeah, I'm not
pilot is an instructor, so I'm kind of double dipping. And Bob, if you're out there listening to me, thank you. You're the best pilot on the planet. But I just when we get on the plane, I want to relax, kind
Yeah.
of. But
Well, of
it's
course.
it's nice to.
You have a
And
jet.
it's an old plane. It's not anything special, but I didn't
better
have to
than
wear
mine.
a mask.
yeah, no, that's nice.
Better than one I don't have.
Yeah.
You know, I get time to spend with my wife. We had our
Yeah.
daughter, and it was
Wait,
a dream of mine.
you have a daughter that's 6'3"? What?
no,
Hold
I have
up.
a daughter that's 11.
Okay.
And you have
Who's the ones
two,
that
two
are?
sons, right?
I have
Oh,
4
boy.
boys.
Oh, 4
well,
boys.
actually, we have
Holy
8 children
crap.
together. My wife and I. We
That doesn't
met.
scare me. My
We were
wife-
both
yeah,
single parents.
6 and 10 for
Yeah.
my family.
We were both single parents, and we met when I was down working in Mexico once, and then several years later, and we bumped into each other again, and we both had full custody of our kids, and we met, and it's been an exciting time raising them. We're down to we were at the final 4, now we're at the final 3.
Jeez.
So we have an 11-year-old daughter and twins that are 16, but my twins that are 16 are 6'3" and 6'4", and they're not done growing, and they eat everything. But they're
Lord.
good kids. My wife is. I married so far over my head, I can't even see it.
Awesome.
She's-
Well, the both of us did here.
She's
too.
tough, and she's, you know, she told me when I met her, she goes, I have 2 passions in my life. And I said, what are they? She said, my knives and my guns.
Oh,
And I was
yeah,
like,
you're married.
You have me at hello.
You guys are like the Warzone Brady Bunch.
I love it.
You know,
It's
she's
fun.
well. She
My
grew
God.
up in Mexico. Actually,
Well, my wife's Mexican too, but yours isn't. I saw a picture.
she is.
She is?
Oh yeah, she grew up and born in Mexico.
Because I was looking at a picture on the.
No, my wife is.
You were in the nonprofit, and she
My
was,
wife was full.
Oh well, my wife's Mexican too.
Yeah, she was. She was.
She has
I
10
found
kids.
out. She didn't tell me. Her mom told me she was teenage Miss Mexico, runner-up Miss Universe.
Guns and everything.
Got married. Well, the guns probably more on my mother-in-law's side because my mother-in-law grew up
Texas.
in the cartel neighborhoods.
What?
She's, and I'm probably not saying she doesn't speak English, so she won't hear this. But you can
What
Google
town?
it and
What
find
town?
that she was caught coming across the border with $1 million. But she
Oh,
didn't get too much trouble for that back in the day.
What town? Do you know?
She was from Victoria, but she also lived in Mexico City, and my wife was born in Reynosa on the border. But my mother-in-law probably was a good fixer back in the day, I've heard.
You can always tell from where they're from.
She knows a lot of
Zacatecas.
people. Zacatecas.
That's where my wife's from.
We just went down to visit. Our daughter was in a program down there, our older daughter, and we flew in right outside of Mexico City to and I'm blanking on the name of this place.
It's okay.
But we
You've been
flew
to too
in
many
our
places.
plane, and I told her, look, we're not going to spend over 4 hours here. We had to
Yeah.
get her and leave.
Yeah. Mexico's rough. Man.
And there was like no one at the airport. And I told our pilot, Bob, I said, Bob, stay with the plane. I said, file a flight plan, and there's a service you can go through. And there's supposedly we had everything cleared, right, to go through this service. But it was, and so went smooth. We go into town, and a beautiful town, probably one of the prettiest I've ever seen.
I love Mexico.
But there were technicals driving around.
Of course.
And guys with, 50s in these technicals, and they didn't have police on them. They didn't
Nope.
have anything on them. They just had, ski masks.
And 50 caliber.
And we're just kind of hanging out. We go get our daughter, and I told her, we're not, and then my wife goes, well, there's a beautiful brunch at this one hotel. So we go to this hotel, and honestly, it was like being at the Four Seasons for brunch. But of course, then when you walk back out on the street, and the guy at the hotel goes, you probably don't want to be here when it gets dark. And I go, I don't plan to be here. And we immediately went back to the airport and couldn't find anyone when we wanted to leave. So I told Bob, let's get on the plane and leave. There was
Why'd
no
you
one
have
there
to
to
find
stamp our,
somebody? Oh, you had to
our
stamp out.
passports.
So you just got on your jet.
And we just got on the plane.
Well, that's why you have a plane, man. You got to go all over the world.
Yeah, but
You gotta bring
in
your
full
own stuff.
disclosure, anyone listening, we did get our passport stamped. We did everything
Yes.
legal, and we had
course you
permission to
did.
come back. But
course you did.
it was really, I was surprised. I've worked Mexico a lot, and it's really deteriorated into. And my mother-in-law, who's a wealth of knowledge on the country, it's tough. She's not happy with their president because, as you saw in Culiacan, when the cartels, when they arrested El Chapo's, Mayo's son, or Chapo's son, and then they basically just they literally tore up the entire town, and the president freed him. Let the guy go. And they don't have a lot of respect for this president, but he wants peace. And
Sounds
I
like
don't
a
know much
couple
about the
mayors we got
cartels,
running
but
around
I
right
don't.
now.
Yeah, sounds like
The whole
Portland.
appeasement thing,
With
the
that,
whole
wrapping it into the United States.
Neville
But
Chamberlain.
it sounds
thing.
like you're more nervous in Mexico than South
I can
America
tell
or
you.
Afghanistan.
I can tell
and
you.
that's our bordering country, right?
Hands down, being
See that?
my wife, who's from Mexico, who lives right across the border, grew up there, can't go visit her grandmother in 10 years. And my wife is fearless, but it's not worth the risk because you
Yeah.
just don't
It's
know.
too-
Someone
there's
spots
no
you,
rhythm.
you can't drive.
Yeah.
There's no rhythm.
Like you
can't,
had it wired where you were going. You just
Yeah.
said that. You know how to survive. That's what I say about Mexico. We stopped going there. We love Zihuatanejo.
See, I surf Seawide.
Oh,
That
God.
was some of the best waves. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Shawshank Redemption. That's why I went, because they said Zihuatanejo, and I went down there with my wife. We did
Oh, I
it.
used to go to Puerto Escondido. I used to fly my small
Love it.
plane to Puerto and surf.
But
for
it's dangerous.
But you can't. My buddy tried
They'll
to go
just
to
snatch you.
Puerto, and they wanted to take his plane in. We cross over in Reynosa, and he had to go to. Usually, the airport's always a safe spot. They tried to
Yeah, 'cause
take
it-
him into town. He had a little
It's town where they get
Baron, Beach Baron twin. He told me he had to go get water out of his plane after they detained him for 6 hours. He got in the plane, spun it up, and came straight back. Otherwise you're going to be kidnapped.
Yeah.
It's a growth
They play
industry.
protection at the resorts, but man, you go out into
But
town.
if you have any
You're free
high
game.
net worth people, or anyone,
Yeah. But we don't even do security down there.
I wouldn't.
We let the Israeli guys. We have a connection down there that they do it, but it's mainly because there is no way to get a rhythm or a connection
you just
that
don't
is
know what-
reliable. It's
what
like
to expect.
so
helped
uncertain.
I got a call one time from
So we just
two
stay away
former
from it.
Delta officers that were working for a high net worth company that needed to go to the Maquiladoras. And he's like, hey, can you help us set up security? And I literally go, sure. And I looked across the table and I go, oye, mama. And I talked to my mother-in-law, and she had him set up where the military met him at the border, took him to the Maquiladoras, and took him back. But yeah, you can't.
Isn't that crazy?
All the places I've been, Mexico, because you just don't know.
Yet we shouldn't build that wall, though.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
what
let's
could
just
go
let it
wrong
in.
with that?
What's the problem?
Well, the thing
We got
is
a
this,
river called the Rio Grande. Leave it. It's beautiful.
in the border towns. You know how
It's
even
been all around the world. The most dangerous place is Mexico.
Hands down. But
I'll
it's
sell you a
sad.
vacation spot down in.
Well, everything's deteriorating.
But
Sounds
the
like.
Mexican
Jeez.
people are good people, and they
Oh,
the
for sure. I mean,
best.
you
yeah.
go
That's
on
why
the
the
border.
best.
My wife and I used to go down and just go to Mexico to have dinner. We can't do that, and it's really hurt the border towns. I mean, they've lost.
Well, my wife has never been able to go back, but her dad, he's just back. He just came from Zacatecas, but he has a connection.
My mother-in-law will go. She'll go to Mexico
Somewhere.
because she can go anywhere.
And
Because
he's protected.
She
So
knows
let's just leave it
everybody.
at that.
Yeah.
So they actually can travel. Hey man, we got to wrap this back to like some current events
Let's
because
do it.
we could go on forever in the past and all those stories, but there's a lot going on in America, and I want to actually just talk about Rob McCoy a little bit because it's how do you know Rob?
You know, I met Charlie Kirk at a dinner,
That's how I met you.
Yeah.
and Charlie goes, "I want you to meet Rob McCoy. He's the greatest guy in the world." And I go, "Well, I'd love to." And Charlie invited me to go with him for a short period on his book tour, and we flew out, and I picked up Charlie and Rob, and we flew down to Mar-a-Lago. And on the way down to Mar-a-Lago, Rob and I just talked, and I was spellbound. I was like,
Yeah, it's
you know how you meet someone and you're like, I could just listen to this gentleman all day, you know, not only a man of God, but like a real man. I mean, a
Yes.
man with integrity, a guy that's wicked smart and
Yes.
understands history, has the experience. But not only that, there's a lot of people that can't project that and put it back into something that everyday folks like me can
just
understand.
distilling it
Distill
down.
it down to something
but
that
he
I
also can navigate politics, you know.
Oh, and not
It's-
navigate.
There's a lot of
Brilliant.
layers there.
Well,
on
and
that
show,
one.
well, and show the connection and kind of the through line, you know, between, you know, what our purpose is, you know, what politics really mean at the end of the day, what our history was, weaving all of that together.
with a Bible verse.
yeah,
Because he-
absolutely.
And
knows
without
the
his head
Bible.
exploding, because I start thinking about it, and you know, I got to duct tape out and start wrapping my
Yeah.
cranium. But Rob does it, and he can really. You're right. He can talk about it biblically, which is our founding anyway. But he can also go to the founding, and then he can tie in
Well,
current
It's
events.
history.
The history is,
He knows the history like that.
and with schools not teaching history now, it's well, you guys.
well, or
when you're-
teaching a, you know, a abhorrent version of history, which is the problem now.
Well, you know what's crazy about the times we're in? I'm learning more about history than I ever knew, and even just doing podcasts and listening. Bob McEwen.
I love Bob's friend. I had him
But-
on my podcast.
No, I was blown away. I was like, where was this guy when I was in school? Where are these
Bob's
people?
a national treasure.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
I-
but
I
where are
truly-
these
and so is
people?
Rob.
Where have we
Yeah.
been hiding them? Because then Rob McCoy is with Charlie Kirk with Bob McEwen. I'm watching that podcast, and Rob McCoy is going, I'm just blown away. Everyone's just blowing each other away
When
with
Bob
this.
started talking, I had both
Right?
him and Rob on my podcast.
So you couldn't do that. That's too much. at
and
one
I
time.
talked to Bob before and got to really know him. And I would just say, Bob, can I just call you and listen?
Yeah, 'cause-
for like 45 minutes a day. He's Keith call anytime. And he's such a knowledgeable man, but
I get to have dinner with him, and
Oh, wow.
you know, I mean, what an amazing time, you know, just listening to him, and I mean, it's just mind blowing.
Someone's got to
So
film this guy.
Yes, it's so much that you can't
he
already
is one of the
always
wide-
take it in.
Well, you know, and we always talk about lessons learned. What
Yeah.
you guys do, what I do, we call it evidence-based medicine.
Yeah.
But in the tactical world and in protection world, you have these are lessons learned. You guys do hot washes, right? You look at a situation, you look at your mistakes, you look at your successes.
debrief.
You debrief.
Yeah.
In medicine, same thing. It's evidence-based. Really got popularized in the 90s. In politics, Pastor Rob McCoy, Bob McEwen, those are evidence, historical-based politicians / ministers / men of God, where they don't approach a problem. They go, okay, we looked at what worked, what didn't. And I mean, you look at a guy like Bob McEwen, who's been a part of the, you know, he's a congressman during Reagan's time
Oh,
in
yeah.
Ohio, which is like, you know, the bastion of politics.
Yeah.
And he really understood the lessons learned. And I enjoyed talking to him because if you look at our founding, you know, the founders studied every government under the world. And you've heard them talk about this.
Yeah, yeah.
And how they came to our Constitution. And it's funny, you know, in 2 seconds, Ben Franklin stopped it, right? Halfway through, 5.5 weeks into the Constitutional Convention. He's like, wait a second. You know, if a bird can't rise without God knowing it, if a bird dies and God knows about it, how can an empire rise without his understanding and approval, basically, is what he was saying. And he was saying, when we fought the British, we met in this building every day and prayed. And if you think about it from a tactical standpoint in our history, the Revolutionary War, we should not have won. From a tactical standpoint, we did not have the better army. We did not have the better logistics. We did not have the better supply chain. The Brits had good intelligence. The Brits had good intelligence, just like the colonists did. And it wasn't till they had amazing stories like the African American that went and was the first double agent, and who worked for George Washington and Lafayette, and then he went over and ended up working for Cornwallis while reporting to Washington and Lafayette.
Do a movie on that.
And it's the most amazing story.
Yeah.
And then when he's working for Cornwallis realizes we're getting that. They turned the tide of the war. George Washington, they had good intelligence, and so he goes to that guy, and he asks him. He says, I believe his name is James. Go back and look at this, and he took Lafayette's name down the road, but he goes. Lord Cornwallis goes to him and says, "You've been a great aid, and I appreciate you, but I need a favor if you're willing to do it. I need you to go and try to get into Washington and Cornwallis and Lafayette's camp and report to me what they're doing." So he literally was asked to go back and spy on the guys that he was working for. So he was able to feed the disinformation, and that was before the greatest battle that gave us the win in the Revolutionary War was an African American. That was a double agent.
Wow.
And that was the intelligence, but that was the grace of God. Just like the grace of God, where a virus could have changed the outcome of the Revolutionary War, because smallpox was rampant in the colonies. And Washington he started out saying no inoculations because it could kill everyone. And then he realized, if I don't inoculate my troops, we're not going to be able to fight.
Yeah, because the British already were.
They were already inoculated,
Yeah.
because they had already been. So they would scrape the scabs of these smallpox.
Oh, man.
And by the way, if you got smallpox, there was a
Pretty good chance you're
33%
gonna die.
chance you were going to die. 1 in 3. That's
Sounds
pretty
like
high
coronavirus.
odds. Just the inversion of coronavirus.
Oh wait, it's 0.33. I think.
it's 0.003.
Yeah, or 0.0.
We've talked about
man.
that, but
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
that's a
interesting
whole
thing
nother
is
one.
Washington put a doctor in jail for inoculating troops, and then,
Jeez.
but this is where I love in the tactical leadership realm what George Washington did. He recognized that he had made a decision. He looked at the evidence based on that decision and realized he was wrong. When do you hear that from a leader, right? Political and military.
These days, not at all.
He said, I'm wrong. So he reversed course in 1777 and inoculated his entire army. Now think about the decision he made then. To inoculate your entire army, if one guy gets it, that inoculation goes wrong, it
30%.
wipes out the whole army.
Oh,
And
wow.
you've lost, period. Because you would lose your ability to fight, because at minimum they all get sick. A third of them are going to die, but they're all going to get sick. He did it, but I like to get inside people's minds. He did it for the chance to fight for freedom. He didn't do it so they knew they would win if they just did this. It wasn't
a
like a sure
chance.
thing. Just for the chance to fight to be free against the greatest standing army the world had known at that time.
That's a great point.
And then
Wow.
before, he inoculated twice, then and one other time, right before Valley Forge. So, I mean, right before that winter where they crossed
Yeah.
the Delaware to defeat the
Heard
Hessians
about the Valley
forces,
Forge.
they had to inoculate again. He did it twice. And the second time he
I didn't realize
inoculated
that.
the guys, that was so he could take guys, some of them who didn't have shoes and bleeding feet, to
In the
go
snow.
fight a very superior force. The Hessian mercenaries, if you study that and you look at the history, they were brilliant, but they were so confident because Washington's army wasn't the best. They had gone out and gotten loaded that night. They were all hung over in the morning, if you look at the actual reports, and they just showed up and defeated them. Kind of like, when you see in the Bible, when you have a lesser force and it shows up and they just win, and then you could see the hand of God. So circling back to Benjamin Franklin now in Constitutional Hall, a year later, they're trying to form a country. They had all those miracles happen to get to this point. And Ben Franklin, and I'm paraphrasing, but I actually have it written down. And you guys, if you've ever listened to Bob McEwen or Rob,
Yeah,
boy,
he's-
they
he's
both
talked
they
about
both
this.
talk
Sounds
about
great,
it.
yeah.
They've got it right.
He stands up and says, "Look, we got to go back to God again."
Yeah.
And they do, And then that's when they come out with the bicameral legislation. And that's when they form literally the greatest nation in the world. So my question is, why are we now, 244 years later, with the oldest government in one of the youngest nations in the greatest country in the world, are we creating a problem with a virus? I'm not saying it's not a problem, but we're creating it, making it much worse to undo everything that made this country great in the first place. And the only way I think that you defeat that is to look back at that history. You have that hot wash, and we need the George Washingtons and the Ben Franklins of our generation to step up. And I believe President Trump, for whatever you want to say, has been a leader. He's been someone that can make a decision and lead from the front. I mean, I can't think of anyone that could take the hits that that man has taken.
That's what I
repeatedly.
said. I think regardless of what you think about him, my wife's a big supporter. I don't vote, believe it or not. I'm actually a patriot. I've worn 3 uniforms. I love this country. But I don't like people that much in politics, even in religion. But there is nobody that I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen a lot of guys in the military and beyond, leaders. And I wouldn't say he was a leader. I said he is leading.
Bingo.
There's a difference. He was a businessman, whatever you want to look in the past. What he is right now, and that's all I care about. I don't care about titles or trademarks. What you do when you're on the X, right?
My buddy Dakota,
is what he's doing.
Dakota Myers.
He's leading.
Dakota Myers is a good
So
friend
you-
of mine. He
yeah.
says it best. No one goes out and goes, "Hey, I want to be this guy."
Yeah.
You just have that moment that comes to in your life. You either
Step up. Yeah.
or
so
you
he said
step out.
He stepped
And
up.
He stepped up, and in a way,
I don't even think he knew what he's getting into. Well, he knew, but he didn't know draining the swamp would be this bad.
I don't think he recognized that, but
Because
I
I
knew
would
he
have
knew.
never.
He knew what he was getting into as far as
Like
the
a socialist
vitriol.
revolution? I mean,
Oh no, he didn't know that.
nobody could have predicted this.
And-
COVID, a pandemic?
He didn't.
No,
see-
nobody.
But you know what he has had happen though, is when he stepped up, he had, and I have some pretty good inside information on this,
Sure.
a real spiritual transformation. I think because I'm like the worst of the worst.
Wait, hold on. So that's important. So you're saying, and this was before he ran for president or during?
I think this was right when he was running for president.
Okay.
My understanding, and I don't want to get, I don't
I know
want
he
to
doesn't have
betray
to be totally.
trust.
No, don't
but-
betray
but
trust.
I-
But,
but
this
I-
is significant.
But he had a real, literally like come to Jesus moment with some good people.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And I
That
had
makes
one
a
in
lot of sense.
2008 because I wouldn't be sitting here now. And I say it this way: God uses people that you would never expect
Of course.
because He doesn't want to share His glory with anybody, and it's true. I mean, the things I look at, President Trump was not the guy that we would think would be doing this. And if you look at it from the world standpoint, you have a guy that is a legitimate billionaire prior to running for office. Now, he doesn't become one after like all the other guys.
Sure.
Married to a supermodel and I know Don Jr., good kids.
Yeah. We
and
talk about that all the
had
time.
probably the best brand, name recognition,
Everything.
respected. Everyone
No
loved him.
reason.
So
Presidency, big step down.
Yeah.
But he had been talking about it for 20 years. You go back and look at his old interviews.
I
on-
saw
Oh, you
Oprah.
watched some
No,
of
I
those
watched
old
Oprah.
interviews
I
where
did.
he
I
talks
studied 'em.
about. I mean, it's amazing because he says very many of the same things that he's saying now. So
Yeah.
he saw a lot of the problems, a lot of
Roger.
things that were going
Yeah.
on with
China,
with
everything.
China, with
Yeah.
the UN, and all these things. I mean, he laid it out way back when. Interesting thing, so I got to meet him one time years ago, well prior to him, running for president or anything like that, because I insured one of his hotels in Vegas, and I just coincidentally he was there that day. Got to see him walk through the the lobby, say hello to us. That was it, right? But I remember it being so remarkable.
Sorry, I'm waving to Pastor Rob McCoy. We were just talking about him.
Maybe his ears were
Okay, this
burning.
is
I don't
weird.
know. It's like,
How
I didn't know
funny.
you guys were doing your podcast here.
We'll have him sit down.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Anyway, but what I found remarkable was all of his employees loved him. I mean, genuinely. The general manager of the hotel said to me that I was his driver, and Mr. Trump told me, if you pay attention, you listen to me, and you learn,
Come on in, Rob.
you.
We were just talking about you, so this is really weird.
well,
actually.
what you're saying about
wouldn't think we
President
produced that.
Trump, my father was a pastor of a church
Got a
in
chair over here.
downtown Manhattan, Calvary Baptist Church on West 57th. So he knew a lot of the people, and he was there late 80s through the 90s for almost 10 years, I think. And he said, he knew a lot of people that knew Donald Trump and said exactly the same thing you did. He said, these people, President Trump, what you just said was what my father heard. He not only was good to people, he encouraged them. You see what you just said? He didn't just tell the guy, thank you for your work. He said, I like to talk to people and say, hey, if you work hard, if you do this, that's a leader. That's someone that's comfortable in his own skin, someone that wants to see you do better. If you wanted to shape what makes a conservative, a Christian conservative, a leader different from everyone else and the liberal progressive, a leader wants to see everyone excel past their potential. He wants to help them move up. That's what this country was founded on. Equal opportunity to achieve whatever that you work for and work hard on an equal playing field. And Trump did that. A liberal goes at you and says, you see that group right there? They're trying to hold you back. And you should feel bad. And it's okay to feel bad. In fact, I created this whole place for you to feel bad where no one's going to attack your feelings so that you can recover. And that's why I believe we are where we are today is we have taken competition. We have taken encouragement. We have taken true leadership. We have taken risk. And everything is risk reward out. We didn't minimize it. We removed it. And so you have a generation that has been brought up on selective history telling, if it's honest at all. A generation that doesn't play dodgeball, that never was told, you're going to get a grade and there's a winner and a loser. We had field day when I was growing up. I'm sure, Rob, you did too, where you had first, second, third. And what happened after that? The other guys got to work harder. My greatest disappointments, my biggest failures in my life have been a catalyst for my biggest successes. And if you don't have that and you've never had that, then that's why we can see a country today be told, you need to do this, be afraid. And they just follow because they've never risked. They don't know what reward is. And a leader encourages risk, calculated risk. And he says reward. And that's what Trump did. My dad said Trump used to encourage people, push them past. I loved, I have probably 100 some employees in all my different companies. I love it when they do good. I mean, I like problem solvers, and Trump is a problem solver. People nowadays want to get paid to work. I tell you, people, you don't get paid to work, you get paid to solve problems.
Well, now what they want to do is they want to be problem identifiers. Okay, which
course.
is just being a complainer. I say it to my people, okay, you're a great problem identifier. I appreciate that, but let's work on being problem solvers too.
One of the best, when I started out, I used to go around to different companies because I didn't know anything about business when I started mine 20-some years ago. And I used to I'd ask them, can I sit in your meetings? I got laughed at, thrown out, but a couple of them would let me hang around. And the CEOs I thought be successful, someone would bring up a problem, and there were a couple that would go, and so what's your solution? And they would go, well, I'm just pointing it out. He goes, don't bring me a problem until you've thought out the solution. And it got that whole group, and I was like, wow, he's right. I mean, look, they're trying to kill college athletics right now. Remember? They don't want anyone. Because that's the purest form of solving problems and how work, sacrifice, and success. There's no racism in the locker room.
Yeah, no, it's all merit-based, and it can be objectively merit-based.
And you can see it, and there's a winner and a loser. And you know what the losers do? They don't sit around and cry. They go back to the gym, they go back to the film room, they go back to the practice field, and they work harder. And you have a group of people, regardless of race, working for one thing, a common goal, and that's victory. And that also, that's why we love to watch college football. It's the purest form. I mean, I played in college. I loved it. It was like, I didn't know what racism was. We had, the guy that got the position had nothing to do with the color. It had everything to do with his skill set. Because the coach didn't keep his job unless he put the best guys on the field. And we have gotten away from that. And I think one of this big push by liberals and progressives right now to kill college football has nothing to do with safety from a virus that won't affect any of these kids significantly, but has everything to do with taking away concrete, real-time examples of leadership, of commitment, of teamwork, of merit-based success.
Showing up is not excellence. That's what I tell my employees.
No, it's not excellent. And you know what? And it's okay to make a mistake. I tell my people, fail forward, make a mistake, learn from it. Now, making the same mistake means you're not paying attention. That's a whole other conversation. But, you know, when I got married to my wife, we both had 4 kids. We'd both been through bad marriages. And she lined them all up. And, I mean, like I said, I married way over my head. And they were young at the time. They were all very young. I believe the oldest was maybe 15 or 16. And she looked at all of them and she goes, you guys need to understand something right now. And she has a thick accent. She said, none of you are special.
Nice.
We had 8 kids. They're in this house, big house. None of you are special. She goes, you may do something someday that makes you special. You may help someone someday that makes you special. But you didn't just land on this or special. Now you're special to us because you're our blood. And we love you, all of you. We're going to treat you all the same. But don't you ever think you're special. Don't you ever think you're above being punished. And realize that we're not here to be your best friends. We're here to create godly men and women. And she goes, do you have anything to say? And I'm like, no, ma'am. And you know, and it really stuck with our kids. And so, you know, we don't create victims, but I think I did a whole podcast on this a while back. I really think America's trying to be the great victim factory because there's something out on Netflix, and you guys got to see it. It's about the 7 most wanted people out there. Each one they go over the 7 most wanted, and the guy from Rwanda that caused the genocide. I just listened to that the other day. Kabanga. Yeah. He was talking, him and his number 2 guy, and he was, through a translator in French, talking about how he did it, how he got people to kill 8 million people. You know how he said he did it? He said you divide them. You find something to divide them on. They did it based on the tribe. He said, the way you take over and are able to go in and pilfer a country, and he said, his words, not mine, take power for a small number of people, is you have to get a large number of people and segment them, make them afraid of each other, and make them hate each other.
Like mask wearing and non-mask wearing people?
Isolate them. And then they played the clips from it's perfect, and they played the clips from the radio station that this guy owned. And you know what they would say? This person doesn't like you because of who you are. They're against you. They want to make you their slave. They want to dominate you. They want to kill you. And they would say this and play it. And he said, if we did not have the radio station, there would have never been a genocide because we couldn't get the information out. And so we
luckily
would not
they didn't have
have
Facebook and Instagram.
Well,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have the division
Jeez,
we
they
had.
just had a radio station. They pulled it off.
But they controlled the means of communication.
it's
And the liberals have
I think they're
the
doing it
major
now.
means. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was
On a
chilling.
scale that we've never seen. That's why I think it was announced that Google is quite possibly the most powerful political organization of all time.
It is.
That's scary. Like, well, who's running Google?
Well, and then look at ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, CNN. It's all propaganda.
Yeah.
So, that's what I'm saying.
Well, you know, obviously we got to wrap this up because you got to get over to the main man. It's good that you showed up, Rob, after we talked about you, because that would have been a little weird because there was a love fest going on in here.
We were all like,
So
man
you
crush.
can go to the podcast and hear it, so it's good. But I have one question.
Sure.
I asked this question because we're all, even the guys in this room, there's a lot of people that are contemplating what you're saying, and I think we all know it. And there's a lot of smart people know it. There's a lot of Bob McEwens and people out there. Not a lot of Bob McEwens, but there's a lot of guys that are in that position, even politicians. Is it too late? Did we sit back so long that they slowly took religion out of schools? They slowly gave everyone a trophy. We didn't get mad when they were taking down statues. And, you know, this whole violent takedown of statues, they were already taking down statues. I've watched this, and I've watched him, and there's another one. Honey, we got to homeschool. What do we do now? Because we all know, and I have this belief, because I'm the guy that goes, listen, there's always a chance. But if you have the oil companies used to control certain parts of the petrodollar, and we had strength on this side, and Texas was a big, even when I see what's happened in Austin, it's gone. I was just down there training. I can't say who, but let's say a large space company that's doing.
Yeah, I've offered to sell Austin to California for 2 fourth-round draft picks and a quarter,
exactly.
I think.
Yeah. and then there's Houston
Give it away.
and Dallas, and I was in the airport, and I'm seeing Texas is a different place. Where are we at? Like, in your opinion, you've been all over the world. You've seen actually socialism in action because you were.
I've seen insurgencies.
Yeah, you were fixing the people, the products of insurgencies, the violent product, and we're having that. We're having people that are being beaten, shot in these riots, and everyone's like, "Oh, this will pass." I'm like, been around a lot of violence, been through some riots, even in LA. Where are we at, in your opinion, on this cycle of?
There's two short, succinct answers to this. Where we're at right now is a really bad place. However, we're probably at a place right now where a man had to make a decision whether to inoculate a ragtag group of guys, 3% of the population that were fighting the greatest army in the world, just for the chance to build a country. We're probably somewhere around there.
Really?
We're probably somewhere around a group of men that went through the Great Depression, then went through a horrific World War One. Went through a horrific World War One, and where we lost a lot of Americans. Then went through a Great Depression. Then went through a crazy
Pearl
World
Harbor.
War II.
Yep.
Friend of mine's dad, last name De La Rosa, he showed me a thing where his father, after they fought in Germany and we were winning, he was on a boat in the Suez Canal. He's 33 years old, going to Japan to invade Japan, and thinking, and they were told, millions, you guys are going to die. And then the boat stopped because someone made a decision to bomb, and that changed the course. Probably none of us may be here today because of it.
Yeah.
So where we're at right now is it looks bad. The good news is the same blood that ran through all those men's veins is running through ours. The same, and more importantly, the same God that this country was dedicated to 5.5 weeks after they were in Constitutional Hall, where Ben Franklin said, let's go home and pray. And let's start every meeting with prayer. That God that allowed them to birth the single greatest nation in the world that gives us electricity, the airplane, the internet, GPS, every modern tech, every advancement is from that in a short period of time. That God is our God. And so as Americans, what I think, and Bob McClure said this had to happen because it was slow. We were in the crab boil. And the Democrats have decided, I'm not going to turn up the heat. I'm going to burn the whole house down. And they've come out and they've shown us. Now you have a decision. No one can sit on the sidelines. No one can't vote and not be political now. That doesn't exist. You either are for good or you're for evil. And
Yes.
Evil has defined itself very clearly. So I don't worry about what's going to happen because my responsibility is to stay rightly related to God. Have the courage of your convictions. And if Americans on both sides of the aisle, Democrats that are listening to this that live in California, and Republicans have the courage of their convictions, if they look at that and say it's wrong, this country will not only change back, it'll change better.
Yeah.
Because the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are not our rights. Our rights come from God. You know, the same guy that allowed us to be here today against all odds. No, it's to keep government from infringing on our rights. And so what we have to recognize, as in any engagement, you guys know this, you have to recognize what you're up against.
Yes. I said we got to identify it early on.
Yeah. And
Call it what it is.
And you know what? By God's grace, they've identified it for us.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
they've
come out and
drawn
said
the lines. So
The
there's
war.
no more hoping that it goes away.
Yeah.
So, you know, I remember our coach came in one time. He says, it's yours to lose. This is, I believe that we can have a revival in this nation the likes you've never seen, because we weren't going anywhere with a slow fade. In fact, a lot of politicians, a lot of Republican politicians, you know, they would just want power. Democrats are committed. This is not a battle between Republicans and Democrats.
No.
This is a battle between people that love the United States of America and want it to remain free, and people that, by their own words and their leaders' own words, want to burn it to the ground and destroy this nation. And they're being driven, just like the genocide in Rwanda, by a few people with a big vocal mouthpiece And useful idiots like Yuri Bezmenov talked about, the useful idiots in the media, the useful idiots in these students, and they want to just destroy it. So we need to look back to move forward. We have to remember the past to protect the future. And everyone should be having a conversation. If every person that listens to this and every person that understands this talks to someone and does what it takes, and that's whatever God puts on your heart. I'm not saying you go out and go crazy, but I'm saying you don't back down. You can't if you love this nation. You know, Pastor Rob McCoy is doing it peaceably, but he is having church.
Yes.
Because Mussolini's wrong here.
Yep.
And you have to stand. And you know what? I mean, Bryce knows me. I don't have much of a governor for things that I don't think are right. And I'm polite. I don't raise my voice, but I'm not backing down. And I could lose everything. I mean, I'm prescribing hydroxychloroquine. I have all my doctors prescribing it. I understand what this is.
We're pulled.
I've been talking about it forever. You know.
Have you really? You've been talking from.
I called Charlie early February talking about this.
What?
Yeah.
Well,
that's a whole
I
nother
mean,
podcast.
it was a known. I mean,
Yeah.
even 2005, Dr. Fauci
The bottom
wrote
line
that
is,
it was
yes,
a known
we can
coronavirus.
win, but you have to look in the mirror and decide the only way you're going to win is you have to step up. This will not be a spectator sport. No one's going to film this. You're going to live it, and it's going to happen, and it's going to be amazing. But we have to do it together.
Well, we'll end it with that because that's some positive stuff right there. And
Right.
that's good.
Yeah. Well,
Man.
thank you for coming in. We'll thank our sponsors and get you out of here because I know you got another one to do.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
So, real quick. So let's thank our sponsors.
Condor Outdoor, Roll Dogs, 805
Yeah,
Combat
805
Sports.
Combat Sports, 805 Machado Jiu-Jitsu.
Tom Car.
Tom Car. That's the one that we really need to announce.
Do you know what Tom cars are?
I don't.
Oh, man. Then you got to come back. You're
I'll
gonna
be
have
here
to-
tomorrow.
Yeah, we're going to be.
Well,
we're
we don't
gonna
have
be
a Tom car yet, so we're going to have these things. You got to fly back because they're going to have a Tom car experience. When are we doing that?
end of September,
in
and we're
Ohio.
going to be showroom for them.
There's a whole ranch. We're going to have these crazy off-road special forces vehicles, and you get to go
I'm in.
out there and go nuts and try to roll.
I'm your
them.
Huckleberry
And you can't
man.
roll
I
them.
love
They have
it.
a 70-degree whatever.
I'll attempt.
All right, so subscribe, give us 5 stars, and it's your life, your
This
rules.
is an amazing place, by the way, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
People got to check this out. It's cool.
All right.
Let's do it.
All right, guys.